My name's Greg Crabb, and I am CISO in residence at Ballistic Ventures and excited to kick off our first TrustChain podcast. Uh, it's around third-party risk. Third-party risk is not a supporting concern anymore. It's how organizations are getting breached, disrupted, and uh, bringing a lot of undue attention to them. Uh, in the last quarter, we've watched attackers bypass hardened organizations by exploiting trusted vendors, open source ecosystems, SaaS integrations, AI platforms. That's what we're going to talk about here today. And that's why TrustChain exists. For those of you that are not familiar, Ballistic Ventures is a cybersecurity focused venture firm working closely with operators and founders to shape where the industry is going next. I am joined today by an esteemed panel of practitioners. Everyone from the person that's wrote the book on software supply chain, Cassie Crowley, to the leader of our Trust Chain Working Group, Sangram Dash, who's CISO at Sisense, and Saker Naxandrium, who is VP of Cybersecurity Threat Management at Elevance Health. And we're going to talk about this landscape that's really driving us today from a risk management perspective. But before I have the panelists introduce themselves, I just want to make a call out to thank two of the Ballistic portfolio companies, Nudge Security and Zip Security, for supporting today's inaugural session. Both are working at the front lines of SaaS governance and security automation, and we appreciate their support in helping launch TrustChain. So I'd like to start by asking each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and share what concerns them most right now about third-party risk. And I'll start with you, Sangram.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity and glad to be working with all of you. I know we have been working for some time, tinkering with ideas of what's the right set of messaging and how do we bring this set of practitioners and collaboration with the industry in terms of creating better solutions to manage third party, fourth party, or in party risk. My name is Sangram Das. I'm CISO and VP of IT at Sisense. Folks who do not know Sisense, we are a data analytics platform. We specialize in embedded analytics. So it's literally within the app, you could see live data orchestrated for various decision making. What gets me excited, in fact, a little bit of a good and bad experience have been around identity and how this identity, someone else does something wrong and we get impacted. And sometimes we do not know how do we respond to that because we do not have enough information. So my comments will be very focused on identity and access management, but glad to be here and glad to be sharing the stage with Cassie. For a number of years, we have been doing this together, and Shaker and Greg as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sangram. And Cassie, thanks for joining us. Literally, you've written the book, so please tell us more about yourself and what's concerning you right now.
Sure. Thanks for having me, and I'm so excited to be here with you all. I'm Cassie Crossley. I am the former Vice President of Supply Chain Security at Schneider Electric, and now I'm CEO of a stealth cybersecurity startup, but also advisor for Shift Security and Cybeats and some other companies that I'm working with. And for me, I am just very interested in the whole back chain, really, what's really upstream from what you're working on, which is why I did write a book for O'Reilly Media on software supply chain security. And it's the subtitle is Securing the End-to-End Supply Chain for Software, Firmware, and Hardware, because it is so important to understand what's in the background with what you're running on, which, as you mentioned, is not just third party, and as Sangram mentioned, not just even fourth party, but nth party. And what this means is that we are completely dependent on items and companies and organizations that we have no explicit control over. So we set all of these controls for our own organizations, yet we are at the mercy of all these other organizations and companies. And that means it can be a do or die when it comes to running our business, because if somebody that we consider a critical third party, or even they're a critical supplier because they're a fourth party, if they go down or something happens, we have no control over that. So I'm really excited to be here today.
Thanks, Cassie. And Saker, you've got that frontline view on third party from a threat perspective. Tell us more about yourself and where you see this as a concern.
Thank you, Greg. Extremely happy to be here. I echo everyone's, thoughts. I'm Shekhar Nagasundaram. I head the global cyber defense and threat management function at Elevance Health. And for people who know us or who don't know us, we used to be known as Anthem, Fortune 20 healthcare organization. We still have three core brands: Anthem, WellPoint, and Carelon. So what worries me these days is not necessarily that vendors get breached. It is more so that we may not and we don't fully understand which vendors have the architectural ability to cascade those failures across the enterprise, be it software supply chain, be it the human contractual supply chain, or a service provider. Identity is everywhere. Everywhere it's now single sign-on. Transitive trust is actually hard to see nowadays, creating more single points of failure. And often we see, as Cassie and Sangram, said, we see third party, but not the fourth. We often call ourselves still the third party risk management, but not nth party. It's changing when the risk is, downstream. So it is that invisible concentration risk inside identity and SaaS ecosystems, which worry me. It is about, that architectural ability to cascade failures across, not individual entities, but literally it's becoming systemic. So Okta, CrowdStrike, you can, pick your favorite, exotic, incident that's happened, but that's what is concerning these days.
Yeah, I love the nth party framing that you share, Saker. It's such a wake up call around what we really need to be thinking about. So one of the things that I want to hop into is the open source challenges that we've seen and the trust exploits in that space that we've seen in the last quarter or so. But before we do that, I want to encourage those of you that are attending to share kind of what are you concerned about in this space. It'll help guide some of the questions that I ask the panelists in the conversation. So please hop into the little text area and speak to me, and I'll monitor it as we go along. If you have any specific questions, I'll try to guide the conversation in that direction. But first off, Cassie, open source and trust exploits. The NPM ecosystem compromise wasn't a vulnerability exploit. It really hit at the core of kind of trust. How should boards and CISOs rethink their open source governance strategy at this time?
Yeah, well, most have not even discussed likely open source strategy. And those in the product security space, we are challenged with working and using open source and the infrastructure that open source is sitting on, which is at risk every day. We've seen that with NPM. We've seen that in the past with GitHub. It's all out there. And so likely what's happening is when you can be tangible with commercial suppliers when it comes to board and CISOs, but how do you really have that discussion when there could be 100 or 500 open source software suppliers and component suppliers in your ecosystems that you're very dependent on? I mean, we saw this originally with Log4j, when all of a sudden the internet and commercial organizations around the world were crippled because of a very easy to take advantage of remote code execution. So with this That started what I hoped had been a discussion on open source. And it did at a government level in the US and around the world, but I don't think it hit the boardrooms as much as it should have. And what that generally means is you should be asking, and it should not be dependent only on enterprise companies to say, do we have an open source program office, one that both looks at the risk of the open source that we're using, but also do we contribute to it? So there's two pieces to that. So I challenge those, CISOs and board executives on the call and leaders to really think about what is it? It's sometimes called an OSPO. So bring it up, talk to it, and don't make it just a dependency of the, let's say, engineering group to have that discussion. It should be a corporate level enterprise risk function to talk about open source program offices.
Yeah, I think some of the things that you brought up, Cassie, are really important from a visibility perspective. I want to go to Saker real quick and think about detection in this space. Um, the detection windows are shrinking from just into minutes from hours, and when you've got an incident like the NPM situation, how are you thinking about this? Cassie kind of led you into some architectural conversation, and love to get your perspective on that.
Thanks, Cassie, and Greg. One, from a threat management perspective, often what we end up doing or needing to do is treating open source software as, how shall I say, a tier one threat or a risk, because it's often embedded, immediately. So whether often with, deep privilege, and zero isolation. So if these components are compromised, entities often can inherit that compromised often immediately. So there is no contract, there is no SLA, there is no legal recourse or even sometimes formal accountability to manage this. So, treating them and engineering verification, having visibility into it and building containment is, extremely crucial in terms of managing the criticality of threats that might come about if you take NPM or more recently Notepad or so on. Having that visibility across the enterprise or your technology estate, so to speak, is critical. And then mapping them out through your, attack frameworks or threat modeling techniques is critical to building those use cases. Looking for a needle in a haystack is a struggle. You should be looking for a needle in a needle stack. That's, reduces that, so you don't look at, and you were spot on, the movement windows are extremely in minutes these days. So, that's what we look at, when these kinds of things are, integrated into your code base, run with application privileges, and often execute and update, automatically. So, and I think that's what the board should also, ask when literally a good amount of privileged code comes from maintainers that we haven't even met. How do we track that? So,
Yeah, very good. It's an architectural issue. There's so many aspects to it from a detection and an engineering perspective. Really great insights. Sangram, for CISOs that need a mature way of addressing these issues, should we make open source dependencies a tier one type risk supplier, or is there another way to approach this? What are your thoughts, and how are you addressing these issues?
So from my point of view, if you look at open source from a legal and contract standpoint, we are putting certain language in the contracts to either indemnify us. But in practice, if you look at, we need to have basic tools to discover what is it we're using, right? Just knowing what is a bigger thing. Then some mature customers of ours are asking SBOM reports, right? They wanted to have open source report, like what are we using in our code? So those disclosures are also happening to some degree. I wish a day will come where we have a clear understanding of these dependencies and what's being used. And obviously, I would say attack likelihood of those, exploitability aspect of it comes together in a way that we can quickly say, okay, I have this piece of code, and where is that piece of code, and how do I go and respond to it? But from a legal standpoint, from a contract standpoint, both vendors we use as well as the customers we work with, we have definitely some aspect of a contractual obligation to disclose what we are using. And we do manage a list of open source libraries and which is authorized, which is not authorized, and then build some compliance on top of it if someone is using something which we have not decided to use in our product. It's a complex problem, but from a practitioner standpoint, I always start with what, right? Do we even know what is it? And do we have a policy behind it? Now, have we just determined what is okay to use, what is not okay to use, or at least what is okay to use? And how do we essentially approach that from a risk mitigation standpoint? But to everybody's point, we did talk about this, like, is it a tier one risk? Of course, it is a tier one risk. And this is going to be really bad in future, particularly when we do have give persistent access to these agents and whatnot. And before you realize, a lot of damage will be done. Yeah, I agree with the point that it is definitely a tier one risk.
Yeah, really good thought processes there, Sangram. And you brought up an issue that a couple of the attendees have put in the chat. Yasika and Rick have both asked about, what's the trajectory of SBOM and AI bombs in this space? And I know that that's a passion for a couple of our panelists. So I'm going to tee it up for Cassie here. With the federal attestation requirements pulling back, where do we see the implications of this? Is it a policy failure? Is it an implementation failure? Are we just not mature enough to be able to take these bombs and use them appropriately? What do you see, where as the challenge space, Cassie?
Yeah, well, yes, as a big proponent of it, and really a lot of that had to do with the fact that leveraging SBOMs for vulnerability management and being able to, as part of your own internal product security CERT team, they were highly valuable. The overall problem, and I provided access to my customers to retrieve those SBOMs for the products that we had. The main problem is the exchange issue. Is that, in fact, one of the questions I see that Rick asked was about SBOMs and binaries. And what happens is, let's just say you have a product, not a SaaS product, but just any product, a edge device that you've installed into your location, a device, a firewall device. If you've not actually pulled and received the SBOM for every single version that you've updated, you don't have that visibility. So we have this something that's called the T Transparency Exchange API, which is in beta. It's an OWASP project. And hopefully that will allow us to exchange SBOMs. But the way that the federal government and others, and we had no other way to do it, is you would exchange a machine readable file. That's great. But how often are you really going to do it? Think about all the thousands of versions of products that you have in a physical location, let alone across your business, that you're dependent on. There's no way to move these quickly and easily through it. Plus, you don't have a way to easily attach it to your asset inventory. And so even when I was looking at anybody's asset inventory, yeah, it might have listed a Cisco, device, but it never said it was using this version. And if I don't know the version of that product installed, how am I supposed to know what vulnerabilities it have or which SBOM I should be looking at? So there's a long way to go. I don't think it's a policy problem. It's still an awareness that goes back to kind of the basics. Is there's not even a way to say, here is the common language that we use to identify these devices or this product so that it can say, I'm using version 1.2 of this. And when you have products that are 10, 15, 20 years old, I mean, it takes forever for us to move that. So it's going to be a long time before you're able to use those in real time fashion. But overall, when you're procuring, when you're doing the, should I be using this product? Having that knowledge of what they've used to build that product, and not just S bombs now, but AI bombs. Can you actually say, with this product that you're intending to use, do you know what model is being used? Do you know what, how it's put together? Do you have that information in regard to the AI bill of materials? We've got a long way to go. So I don't think it's a full policy failure, but I think it's a transparency failure in that we've not had a way to move this across from organization to organization quickly and to get that information easily.
Cassie, great. A lot to unpack there. I'm going to send it to Sangram, and from your vantage point as a software provider to organizations, providing SBOMs, you see it day in and day out as a consumer as well. How are you viewing these issues? And now AI is really accelerating the change in the complexion of software packages. What are we dealing with here? And what are some of the approaches that organizations should be thinking about to mature?
So from my point of view, I always take it what I can control and how do I prioritize to fix those, right? Obviously, it is just understanding what is it is a bigger thing. But then when it came to prioritization, I focused a lot on runtime aspect of it. What software actually being executed versus being there. That helped me to do a little bit of a prioritization. Similar model, what we do with vulnerability management as well. But we took that approach to do some cleanup activities. But this is an ongoing battle. The reality is making sure that we know what is allowed is a bigger win. And then scanning to ensure that are there newer pieces of code or getting in which we can essentially exclude, right? So that's kind of my thought process. Obviously, contractually, we got to sign certain contracts and got to give the disclosure. We need to run the report like CycloneDX or SPDX, share it to them, they consume it, then obviously we get certain pushback on some of the larger enterprise customers in terms of the risk and severity and whatnot. This is like you're always running and you're trying to always catch up. I don't think any CISO out there will say that they got a control over this. But what I'm hoping that industry will, their partners who are listening and the builders who are listening to this, they possibly will build better solutions around those, right? Which can literally get integrated into in your software making process, the CI/CD process. Like it will just, let's say you are using a piece of software where it says, don't use this version. This is not good. Go and use that version, right? Even that simple nudge will do a lot of good for the industry.
Yeah, I like it. Saker, how are you thinking about SBOMs and AI bombs in your threat detection and response capabilities?
I'll hit it two ways. One is I think Cassie touched on a few things, and Sangram. One is SBOMs are fundamentally needed for transparency. It is not a particularly failure for of policy or anything. We need that understanding of what's in it first before we can manage it, be it SBOM or be it AI bomb. And we've been getting good at generating those inventories. So what we do is now we have to operationalize it. So essentially understanding, be it the AI supply chain or an AI bomb or a software, that understanding gives us a view of what exposures could be. And that feeds into what kind of detections do we need to in terms of a threat model, in terms of building out the right levels of detections in terms of what capabilities we need and what's, white spaces are there when it comes to being able to detect and then, respond. So industrialized SBOM is, has become faster than our ability to use it. So I think that's where we are going. How do we, use that transparency and visibility into and translate that into speed of action, which ultimately will reduce risk. So moving from a static SBOM into continuous threat and exposure management, posture, if you will. So that's where, be it SBOM or be it AI bomb, we're looking at provenance of it. Where is it coming from? Is it accurate? Even using digital signatures to make sure that it's right. And then validating it and looking for anomalies. Is there any anomalies, that we should be? It is moving from static policies of detection into more indicators of behavior, if you will. Less indicators of compromise, but more indicators of behavior that we can then see, dig further and reduce any, surface area of issue, if you will. So that's kind of how we, I look at it.
Yeah, Sekar, I want to stay with you. One of the attendees, and I encourage everybody to keep asking questions here. Sergio asked a question about our abilities as practitioners to detect and respond to vendor degradation. And I want to frame this in the context of what we dealt with relative to the SaaS trust chain and access path risks that we've seen lately around shadow IT and SaaS. And, as you know, we've got a portfolio company called Nudge that, really sits in this space to help organizations visualize their dependencies from a SaaS discovery and OAuth chain perspective. But how do we need to be thinking about detection and response for these kinds of Salesforce style identity integration breaches?
That's a really good question. I think as we are looking at some of these, and I mentioned earlier, it seems to be SSO everywhere. And, some of the determinants of risk is an understanding of identity federation, be it identity provider integration, be it, single sign-on, OAuth scopes, if I were to go down a geeky thing, and how do we do API integrations, permissions, privileged accounts, admin delegation, direct connections with peers. So those are some of the constructs that we need to build in terms of not just understanding what's just Salesforce, but is there a sales loft behind it? Is there something else behind it? And getting an understanding of that transitive, that's what I was initially saying. We don't know often what the architectural impact or the architectural, depth of connectivity, can be, is what we should start, measuring on. Because from a board perspective, it's less about spend, but more about the blast radius, because that's what determines your blast radius. So that's kind of how we, are thinking about, detecting and responding, understanding the architectural depth of the issue, and then threat model it, and then you can build a certain level of predictability to that detection. Ultimately, the trustworthiness comes from the predictability. How much do you know, and is the system responding in a predictable fashion, and assuming failure and then having resilience to it. I think that's the ultimate goal. Not worried about failure. It's going to happen, but worried about how can you quickly come back.
Yeah, I love how assume failure and how quickly we can come back. Sangram, when we think about these types of issues, and I see uh, Gautam's question here about continuous TPRM, and um, that just yells to me as a maturity thing that we need to be thinking about in this industry. How are you thinking about it? How should we be thinking about it as practitioners?
So from my point of view, a lot many CISOs do not focus around corporate identity like Salesforce or NetSuites of the world. We are very much platform security, cloud security, incident response, detection and response. So this particular one might have come surprise to many just because we don't think about it day in, day out. Like it's a SaaS, is great, right? But then when you look at this SaaS product, we did not go to the extent of knowing how the connectivity is, like how many apps they're connecting. Sometimes they're like connected to 100 plus, 200 plus, apps. And then the auth is very over permissive. So when the designers designed this piece of software, they could not bring it down to least privilege principle. So when you have a bit of a over permissiveness within that connected system, it is bound to be exploited some way or form. Now, the bigger that's number one. Number two, we don't even know when that attack or that compromise has happened, right? It's literally people logging in. And you assume you do not have any information. Even if the information comes out as an announcement, you're trying to talk to some of these vendors, they will say, yeah, I do not know, but you are being named as the vendor who has been impacted. No, we do not know because we are on that other company's marketplace. So you go to that company, they say it's not our problem, it is their problem. Talk to them. So you bounce around for a day or two to determine what happened. Then end of the day, it is a log, and you don't have those logs. Like some of these big companies, they say, oh, you want log, pay us 30% more to get that log. And security, it should be, it's a trusted relationship. And when you are being asked to even do your own investigation, pay 30% more of your contract amount for that is kind of like a little not so cool. So there are multiple problems we have in here. Obviously, over permissive access we're talking about. We are talking about trusting each other in terms of our judgment of investigation and what really happened and things of that nature. So as a practitioner, this is what I'm doing. I said, let's just audit all these connected apps. Let's just make sure that we know what you are connected to, and then limit the scope of those access, both from a classic authorization standpoint and whatnot. And sometimes we are surprised that we are not even using a bunch of those apps. Disconnect those, right? So get rid of those. And obviously the basic things like enforce MFA, IP policy, put it behind some sort of network, Zscaler or whatever, and monitor those activities. So that's kind of like the broader sense how I think about it as a practitioner. But this is definitely a nightmare because you do not have visibility into those SaaS applications. Who are they talking to? What level of information being shared? Even if you try to do a threat modeling, I don't think you'll go too far because there are things we possibly do not know, which or do not get shared. Even your TPRM, so-called, assessment process, like whatever we do in terms of looking at a certification, right? So this is a deep problem. So coming back to the continuous monitoring, there are some good platforms who essentially do a continuous monitoring, but that too also limited based on what is it in public domain. So some of these incidents and the details behind the incident, which can help us to learn from each other, do not come out to the public domain. And that is why TrustChain exists. Like the reason we thought of building this forum is, can we talk about some of those things which without hurting or shaming anybody in a responsible way and be better at how we manage this risk? And there's a lot to learn, but the reality is if somebody can simply log in, they will log in. And how do you prevent those logins is up to us.
Yeah, really good. A lot to think about there, Sangram. And I think, one thing that sticks out in my mind relative to what you said is this is a risk that is really invisible to the security practitioners inside an organization. And Cassie, I think some of the things that you were talking about early on, relative to the importance of visibility come up here. How are you thinking about these identity integration attacks, and how do we evolve as a ecosystem of practitioners to be able to help address it?
Well, how am I think about it? It really terrifies me, honestly. When I'm thinking about even just agents being able to build identities on the fly and spawn additional services and activities and what's going on. It used to be it was very centralized. You had to have administrative access to create accounts or to do this or to do that or create the tokens. And now we have this ability with, let's just say, agents that are over permissive, and they can create whatever they want to be able to expand out our expand our footprint without even realizing it. So I'm very worried where we're going with this. We know that we've lost those set of walls that we had before, but we at least had control of our service accounts and API tokens and such. And now that that's gone, so being able to understand not just again who you've given access to, but what their access and permissions are in regards to that and what guardrails are put in place. It's very important. This is way beyond where we've been when it comes to that trust chain. We need to think more, and I know it's overused and we haven't used the term at all on today's, but that zero trust mentality and least permissions. We need to get back to some of the basics when it comes to that. For example, I can't do hardly anything without giving people and systems access to way too much permissions, even in my Gmail every day, right? If I want to be able to access and have certain functionalities, now they have access to more information than I would be comfortable. But am I willing to take that risk? And how much are we doing that for each one of these companies as these agents proliferate? So we have a major problem in that we just don't understand how to truly manage that fully because permissions are unique for each platform. And how do we control that? It's not where we used to be. Oh, well, this is what Active Directory gives. We're not in that world anymore.
That a lot to unpack there. I agree with you completely, Cassie. We have so much to do. And to your point, with Agentic, we are just giving so much permission to unapproved SaaS integrations from a shadow perspective. Sergio asked another question here in that regard. And it brings up one of the sponsors of this podcast, Nudge Security. If you're not familiar with them, really encourage you to check them out. But I remember, being at the kickoff for the creation of Ballistic years ago, and these young entrepreneurs were so excited about their idea of being able to help organizations inventory their SaaS integrations, and it was the Nudge team. And we are so much further down the path now that if practitioners aren't implementing those kinds of technologies, we're so far behind. One of the things that just strikes me, and I encourage folks to continue asking here questions. I want to go to, here we've got another question from Nithyan. Are organizations ready to move towards a continuous, transparent security posture sharing for better TPRM instead of relying on static questionnaires? What do you think about that, Sangram?
Well, in principle, yes, we should do it. But in reality, we all have contractual obligations between different entities we work with. And then there is the other side of it, which is we typically don't have immunity in terms of disclosure under various regulatory requirements. So it's even if you have the intent to go out there and scream on a rooftop saying that I have a problem, you cannot do that. That's harder. And there is also the window of opportunity for the bad guys, because if they know that there is a backdoor somewhere, and if you put it out there in a broader way, there could be other interesting parties will try to exploit that. So there is a delicate balance. But I believe with AI, and that's kind of one of the premises we talked about in this forum, on a private forum, is this space going to change drastically with AI or agentic AI? And the answer is yes, because there will be a lot more information available, which can be assimilated and essentially used to build some sort of early signals that we can react on. So let's see how that space is evolving. But in today's world, there's a bit of contractual obligations and regulatory obligation, which sometimes, even if practitioners want to get out there, do that, legal teams typically take it over. And you are basically doing what practitioners must do well, is trust the information, trust the log, trust the data.
Yeah, absolutely. Really great questions. And I want to just, one area that we didn't spend a lot of time covering, and I think is really important, is the uh, declining number of headcount in organizations to be able to address these issues from a scale perspective. And I just want to make a shout out to one of the portfolio companies that supported this, called Zip Security, which is really trying to compress enterprise grade security and compliance automation into something that even smaller teams can manage. I want to close out with a lightning round on differentiation. What is going to be what should we be looking for in 2026 for those organizations that are going to differentiate themselves from a leadership perspective in this TPRM space from those that are going to fall behind? And I'll start with Cassie.
I think one of the main things is, and it was mentioned quite a bit, is you need to be able to respond quickly to the signals that are out there. And the only way to do that is with continuous monitoring. You shouldn't have to wait until you hear it on the news that you may have a supplier or an issue. You should know your connections and really be able to see how they map out in your full network. And it's even if you, for example, were not a CrowdStrike customer, you were Sentinel-1, half your suppliers were probably CrowdStrike customers. So you need to understand where your potential resilience can be impacted. And the only way to do that is with having better signal.
I like it. Sangram, from your perspective, and maybe you can work in Jessica's question here, on investments and trade-offs as we think about 2026. What's going to differentiate organizations that lead and those that are fall behind?
Yeah, since we're talking about risk management, mostly end-party risk management in that domain, I would focus on a technology or piece of like platform which can give me continuous threat monitoring based on my set of known vendors, and then possibly vendor's vendor, right? Or partner's partner. Want to get some sort of real-time threat or some sort of intel coming to us saying that there's a problem happening somewhere. And that is a practice for sure, which we are doubling down to make sure that we at least say doesn't impact us, or yes impacts us, then what, right? So that kind of mindset. Investments will definitely moving more towards the real use cases being solved by some sort of use of AI technology, right? So I'm looking at much modern set of partners who are essentially rewriting the industry in a way that we can put it to our security stack. Particularly, the way I think about this is the tech stack and the security tech stack is going to be very different at 2, 3, 4 years from now, and hence this is very interesting, and I really love to be in this space just because I learn more from my partners than my team, because they think about the problem very differently. They come up with good ideas, and sometimes I scratch my head, why the hell I didn't think about this, right? So it is essential for us to kind of learn from each other, share with each other, and take this collective responsibility to secure of course, the companies we work for, that infrastructure, their employee and stakeholders, but beyond, how do we share this information with each other to be better at what we do? So that's where I think investment is just follows. I think for now, the investment is all up. I mean, anything new done better using AI is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, makes sense, Sangram. Sekar, you are on the front lines of detecting and responding to these attacks. I'd love to get your opinion on what's going to differentiate the leaders from those that are going to be victims.
I'll keep it, simple. And I know we're coming up to the end. The boards ask, often will ask, and in this, in this scenario, which vendor failure could halt operations? How fast can we revoke and recover? That's going to be the board question. To be able to answer that and tie that back with, what Cassie was saying and Sangram was saying, to get signals, I think AI is going to be, critical in building that vendor dependency or interdependency graph, so to speak. Take the contracts, use AI, build that interrelationship. Once you get that, you are able to then measure your blast radius, and then not just vendor count and so on. That helps you further to understand concentration risk, which are the tight pockets where you need to focus, where the tentacles are. Then that gives you a better way to quantify systemic dependency exposure. You can take, large, breaches or events, if you will, that have happened. And then that can then tie into better resilience. So I'll leave it at that. So there's a causal thread from, visibility to signals. If you take the military construct of observe, orient, defend, act, you can literally take that in and do this mapping here.
Yeah, I think you're leaving us on a very important framework, Sekar, around, and one of the things that just really strikes me from this conversation is our lack of visibility on what really in-party risk means to our organizations. So, I'd like to thank everyone that's attended. You've become a member of the TrustChain from a practitioner perspective with excellent questions to guide our conversation today. We're really here to try to reimagine third-party risk in the age of agentic, and I think Sekar would argue in-party risk. And then I'd also like to thank Nudge Security, Zip Security, and the great team at Ballistic Ventures, David Hahn and Michelle Kincaid, for all that they're doing in order to be able to make the TrustChain webinar series. As I said, this is our inaugural webinar. We look forward to many, many more, and thank you all for participating.